to Clarity on Fire, a podcast for people who know what they don't want out of their life and career, but aren't sure what they'd rather be doing.
In a world where it's easy to exist, but hard to feel alive, we, Kristen
and Rachel,
two certified life and career coaches, are here to help you cut through the information overload, get unstuck, and focus not just on how you can have a career you're passionate about, but how to create a whole life that feels fulfilling.
So join us here, where we serve up inspiration and down-to-earth wisdom in a way that only two best friends can.
We want you to experience the relief of knowing that, yes, you're allowed to want more out of your life and career.
And no, you don't have to wander through the dark anymore. Our job is to light the fire that shows you the way. Let's go. Hi.
Hey.
Okay.
I'm laughing preemptively because
I know this is a dark laugh.
This is
You know
gonna,
what I mean?
This is gonna get fiery.
As it should. Okay, so I know that a lot of you are exhausted, like to your bones, to your core, to the very marrow of your being. You are tired, and you are tired about a lot of things. You are tired about the state of our planet. You're worried. You're literally, some of you, and I've had legit conversations with people who are of childbearing age who are like, I genuinely don't know if I should have children because I don't know if I should bring kids into the situation that we're in, like, you know, planet, global,
Climate wise.
Like,
I had this conversation with a client last night, literally last night.
Yes, legit.
Like that was
and it's a
factor in her decision.
It's a totally legitimate fear. Like it's a completely and utterly legitimate question. And it's also okay if you've chosen to have kids, like that's fine too, but it's also a legitimate question. You're exhausted about the state of our America. If you're an American, you might also be exhausted by the state of whatever country that you're in, because all of them seem to have issues. Ours is just particularly special, I think.
I feel like life has always been kind of exhausting, but the last, I don't know, 3 to 4, 5 years have just been no breaks.
Yeah.
No breaks,
No
in the chaos.
Absolutely none. Not a single one. Like
nobody
I can't
on this
of,
planet got through the last at least 2 years unscathed,
right,
unaffected.
Obviously, like you might be exhausted by the pandemic too.
Sure.
So
pandemic
like
fatigue is a real thing.
We're just literally piling exhaustion after exhaustion after exhaustion after weariness after like load on top of us. And I haven't even talked about your personal exhaustion, which is what we want to talk about today, because I know that you're looking outside of you. And honestly, I don't even care from what standpoint you're viewing. This could be equally applicable to someone who has completely opposite beliefs of mine personally, and they could be looking at a situation and also feeling exhausted for completely different reasons.
The reality is, I don't think a lot of people, regardless of political belief, regardless of religious belief, regardless of societal belief, whatever, who are like real happy right now. Like, no, this is good. Like nobody's happy.
I'm not seeing a lot of happy people. I'm not seeing a lot of like,
who are like, I think the world is exactly where it should be. No, I've not heard that from any human. So there's probably something that you feel fired up about, but also feel equally drained by.
Yeah. So the point that I was making is that we know that there are limits to our ability to control huge, huge things that deeply affect us personally, but that are the way the Supreme Court rules is outside of your control, but it deeply can affect you personally. The state of the globe and the climate affects you personally, and you don't have a lot of control over it. And that is exhausting in and of itself. So we have to take control back where we have the influence, first and foremost, to take control back. And in so doing, you gain yourself more energy and more momentum to contribute to the energy of the whole. Because if the whole is something you want to fix and contribute to, you can't do it if you are, to call back to our Dear Rachel episode from 2 weeks ago where we talked about burnout. You can't do that if you're a husk of a person. Like, you got to have extra energy to give. So Kristen and I are very, very, very tired of being tired, and we're tired of other people being tired, and we want to help you be less tired. And so this is an episode about burnout in a sense, but it's going to go deeper than that, because we talked a lot in that Dear Rachel episode about burnout, but we didn't really talk about the root, nor did we really talk about like the systemic nature of burnout and why so many of us are burnt out. This is kind of a follow-up episode to a couple of episodes we've done. Maybe that episode from 2 weeks ago. Definitely one of the first side chats we ever did. It originally was called How to Work Like a Woman. And then when we brought it back a couple years later as a Magic 8-Ball episode, that's when we were just like revisiting old episodes. We called it Masculine versus Feminine Energy. I will link to it in the show notes.
One of my favorite topics that we've gotten into, favorite concepts that I still bring up with clients all the time. That is a game changer. I don't care how many times we revisit this, it's always relevant, but we're going to put a different spin on it this time, because it just feels very current. Like we need to talk about this, but we need to talk about it in a different context, the current context that so many of you are feeling, what we're feeling. And somebody has to talk about it.
Somebody has to talk about it. So I want you guys to go back and listen to that episode, but I also want to give you just like a 2-minute debrief of it, if in case you haven't heard this, because this is important for you to understand what we're like, the words we're using and what they mean and what they don't mean. So in that episode where we talk about masculine versus feminine energy, we're talking about energy. Okay. We're not talking about sex. We're not talking about gender. We're not talking about how you identify. We are literally talking about energy. The same way that like
yin and yang energy, and that would mean the same
sun
thing.
And moon energy. Sure. And it would mean the same thing. It's just like how you can't look at someone on the outside and go, well, I know that they're an introvert. No, someone doesn't look like an introvert, right? It's just their energetic wiring. It's their preference. It's how they were born. It's just what they gravitate toward. Everyone is born with a preference, with a wiring that is more toward masculine energy or more toward feminine energy. Masculine energy is about
achievement, striving, action, strategy,
competition, quantity. So like metrics and numbers and logic,
discipline,
discipline, rigidity, structure. Feminine energy is the polar opposite of that. It is being, not doing. It is quality over quantity. It's emotions and intuition instead of logic.
It's flow instead of structure. It's a little bit. It is more fluid than it is well defined. It's more intuitive than logical. It's more receiving,
collaborative
than going
over
after,
competitive,
and attracting versus then pursuing.
Yes, it's magnetizing something to you instead of chasing it down. And so the point that we made in that original episode, which again, if you haven't listened to it, I cannot encourage you enough to go listen to that after this, or even pause and go listen to it and then come back if you want to. I don't care. Take whatever journey you want to take, but listen to that episode, because what we talked about is that the working world was built by people with a lot of masculine energy for people with a lot of masculine energy. The way that the working world is structured is incredibly rigid. It is incredibly rules oriented. It is incredibly like 9 to 5. These are the rules. Your due date is this.
KPRs or whatever. You have your productivity reports. You have performance reviews. You have expectations and responsibilities and things you're achieving and hours that you're supposed to be working. There's very strict structure and rigidity and high
a lot
pressure
of competition
built into the work system that most of us are working in.
Yeah.
Highly masculine on that scale of energy.
To the point, I mean, again, we could give you a million examples, but you guys are living it. You're living it because this is the way the working world works. The way we know it doesn't work like that is because the average job, the average employer isn't saying, hey, work when you want to work. It's no big deal. Like your deadline, maybe you have a deadline once a month, but like you can kind of flow toward that deadline. Like there's not always a ton of collaboration. There's often a lot of pitting people against each other. There's often a lot of making decisions based on what makes logical sense, not what is in the best interest of the employees or their mental or emotional well-being.
Most employers, whether they would put it in these words or not, are trying to get the highest output from you for the lowest pay. And treating you more like a robot who is a productivity robot than a
literal
human
resource.
Yes.
A literal resource.
A biological human who is has other needs other than to perform the tasks that the employer wants.
Yeah. Yes. So the working world is heavily weighted toward masculine energy to a point where it is unhealthy.
And we're feeling this because it's stealing all of our health.
Yeah.
Mental health, physical health, emotional health.
So if you want things to change, it has to start with you. That's not corny. That's just true. Like if you want things to change, you have to have the resources and the energy to and I don't care if we're just talking about your life or we're talking about anything beyond your life. If you want something to change, it has to start with you. And Kristen and I are incredibly fired up at this moment about the fact that, and like, I'm just going to drop the truth bomb like I usually do. You and most of us are in some way, and pretty much every client Kristen and I are working with right now are both suffering from this and are doing this, are enabling the continuance of their own suffering by participating in the system as it is without pushing back, without breaking any rules, without trying to make any changes. They are enabling their own suffering by continuing to allow the system to abuse them as it does. And so today, what we want to do is by the end of this conversation, convince you that rebellion is the only sane path to take and inspire you to stop enabling the system by your own participation in it.
Yes.
Okay. Should we start with some examples potentially?
First, before we do that, I want to validate why we do this, because nobody would willingly let a system, a person
take advantage
of them if they didn't think they didn't really have any other recourse. So it's why this is especially prevalent and dangerous at work is because we feel like we have to abide by the system that we're in out of fear that it will take away our very means of survival. So it's a little easier when someone's taking advantage of you in a friendship or maybe potentially even in your family, because even though it's really awful and uncomfortable to stand up for yourself and potentially end that kind of relationship when it feels unhealthy, your very survival usually doesn't depend on that. So you can end a friendship and not worry, am I going to end up homeless? With an employer, there's that added complexity and feeling of dependency of, well, if I rebel against this system, am I going to end up with no way of taking care of myself? So it's extra warped for that reason. And so I understand why so many of us are afraid to buck against it, because we want to make good lives for ourselves. We want to be comfortable. We want to have enough money and resources to be able to live the life that we want to be able to live. And so we think that's the rule. We think that's the bargain that we signed up for. You you put together this system. If I opt in, I have to just abide by it all, no matter how much it crushes my soul or ruins my health, so that I have the resources to pay for my life.
We
Part
talked
of the
about
reason
this.
I want to bring up some examples is to show you your fears about speaking up and losing it all are probably unfounded. I understand them, but I don't think they're accurate.
Mm-mm. We talked about this. So this episode is also a follow-up to our side chat about how to tell if you've had career trauma. So I will link to that one too, because we talked about like the abusive nature of work and how it is abusive, but we don't call it that. We have like this aversion to calling it what it is. So I think you also really need to listen to that one if you haven't heard that one, and I will link to that. It was within the last 6-ish months. Maybe it was last fall. It wasn't that long ago in the grand scheme of this podcast, but I'll link to it in the show notes. Yeah, that's why we let it happen. But Kristen is right that if you don't question it, if you just go, oh, well, that's how it is, that's how you enable things to keep being bad. When you are willing to question the fear that, wait, maybe my whole life isn't going to fall apart and I'm not going to end up homeless and I'm not going to lose out on the ability to feed my children just because I bucked against the system. Like, that's when things can change. As long as you think that nothing can change, nothing will, and people will continue to profit off of your suffering. And I can't stand for that anymore, because literally everyone I know, every client I have is exhausted. And this is one of the things at the core of just our complete like systemic breakdown. So like,
how can
we
any
have
of us
to question it as a group?
How can any of us just, first of all, get through our lives and get done the things we want to get done and achieve our own personal goals when we're exhausted, because all of our energy is being sapped by our participation in a system that is not meant to be healthy for you? That's not the goal of it. But
no one set it up because they were like, we care about people. No, we care about making money. That's why. Okay.
Yeah. So
that's
if you're participating in that system, but also wanting to have a really healthy, full life where you're achieving your own goals, well, those things are at odds. And then forget about trying to make any other kind of bigger impact or contribution to the world at large. You don't even have enough energy to get through to the weekend, much less to figure out how am I going to leave my positive mark on the world. So we got to start way back at the most immediate crises that is stealing all of your energy.
Okay. So some examples, some thoughts, some stories we're going to share. First things first, my friend Katie Beth, who has been on the podcast before, sent me a TikTok video over Instagram, because your girl does not have TikTok. I have millennial TikTok, which is Instagram. So anyway, I saw this TikTok video where this girl was like, hey, does your salary have a cap? Yeah. Okay, great. So does your effort.
Oh, I don't have TikTok, and I also don't go on Instagram, but I want someone to send that to me so I can forward it to every client that I am currently working with.
Your effort.
And all my
passwords. I have a story to go along with this. One of my clients right now is a very, very, very conscientious people pleaser. We're working on it. Just as an aside, a lot of you, the reason you are enabling the system is because you are a people pleaser. So one of the best ways to become a rebel is to get over people pleasing. When we have a course coming out about that next month, which I am going to promote, because, hey, as long as we live in a capitalistic hellscape, I'm going to make money.
But also, can we make money and help people?
We can. It's possible.
Can we make a win-win here? Like, that's what I'm here for.
We are making win-wins anyway. You got to find levity where you can. And that's where I find it in being ironic. Okay. So anyway, my client, people pleaser, she had something happen to her that I bet has happened to you or around you at some point. I don't know if they let someone go or if she just got a ton more work added to her plate. This was a year ago. I think it was like there was an assistant and the assistant left. And so instead of immediately hiring a new assistant, she just ended up taking on like a huge portion of that person's work in addition to hers. Okay. This was a year ago and they still haven't hired anyone. So she is killing herself day in and day out. She has not been taking lunch breaks ever for a year. Like she's not taking lunch breaks. She's working her butt off. She's exhausted. She's miserable, as you would be. And I was like, do you want to hear the hard truth? Like, she was like, yeah, okay, I do. Tell me. I was like, if you had said a year ago, great, that's fine if you don't hire someone else, but I'm not going to be taking on that person's work. You're paying me to do this job. This is the job I am currently doing. If you want to give me more work, you're going to have to pay me more. Like,
because you were paying for a whole other job. So if you want
you're paying me for this job
to do that job, then if that's going to be me, I get that money too. That's how it works.
It's not my responsibility to stretch myself to unreasonable ends to accommodate your poor budgeting or hiring decisions. That's literally not my responsibility. I don't run this business. It is not my job to kill myself to make up for your cheapness or your lack of resources or whatever problem you have. So you're either going to have to pay me more to do this, or I say literally, no, I cannot accommodate that request. You're just not going to get that job done if you don't hire someone to do it. And she was like, if I had said that, they would have hired someone within weeks. And she was like, because I didn't. And I just let it happen. I let them pile on me. I just tried to absorb it because, again, I didn't feel like I had a choice. I felt like, well, this is just what you got to do. This is how working goes. Like, well, they might fire me if I say no, and my survival depends on it. All of the things that are unconsciously going on in the back of your mind when something like that happens. I don't blame her for doing what she did. And I don't think she blames herself either. She's just in hindsight seeing what could have been different. But in hindsight, if she'd said that, they would have hired someone. Instead, she overextended herself and completely burned herself out for the next year. And they still haven't hired someone. She has enabled her own suffering for an entire year plus because she was not willing to say, no, this doesn't work for me.
Oh, man. And I get it because how many of us would have done that? Like, I know most of you are listening to this saying, I probably would have said the same thing. I would have felt like I didn't really have a choice and just taken it on. Like, this is the reaction that probably 90% of people would have. There's a small subset who would have been like, no.
Yeah, no.
But that's not the majority. And frankly, I'm not going to say companies or managers or anyone in particular is relying on that. But I am going to say if you don't buck back, they're not going to be like, I think you're doing too much work. Let's take some work off of your plate. Like, they're not going to be.
No.
They will take advantage, maliciously or not, if the option is given to them. And most of us just give them that option because we feel trapped. We feel like we can't say no for whatever reason. I do, just for a minute, because I think so many of us get stuck in our own experience. I want to imagine being on the other side of that. Can you imagine being a manager or an employer and you've lost somebody, so you already don't have somebody to take over the work, and then you try to ask another one of your employees, can you take on some of this? And they say, I'm already at capacity. I cannot. Is your first instinct to say, let me fire them, and now I have 2 gaping holes?
Now I'm really hemorrhaging.
Right? Probably not. Like, that's not going to be their first go-to. They're going to say, well, we got to get somebody to do it. So they'll either ask somebody else or they'll go hire somebody. But
now,
your fear of getting fired is not as likely as you think if you just put yourself in the other shoes for a minute.
No, but you know what is likely? Because a lot of people have dick managers, is the manager's going to be like, well, you're not a team player. And you go, you bet your ass I'm not. Or
you say, do you really want me to be a team player? Because I can do this job well, or I can do both of those jobs not well.
Wait, I just came up with the best comeback to that. Yeah. I'm a team player. I'm not a whole team. That's
yes.
You know what I mean? But like, you got to hire someone because I'm one person. I'm not the whole team.
Yeah, a team player implies
what are
there
they
are
say?
others
That's a
to
sick
play
burn.
with.
They're not gonna have a good comeback for that. That is the comeback. You know what I mean? Like, they're not gonna know what to do with that.
I'm already imagining the GIF I want to go after that statement. Yes, that's what I mean. There's ways of responding that are not like, no, I won't do it. I don't care what you think, because most of our people have some people pleasing tendencies. And you're not going to be able to do that. And I don't expect that of you. That would be so out of character and out of integrity that that's an impossible ask of yourself, to become someone who gives no cares about other people's reactions. But I do think there's a lot of validity in saying, I can do this much well. Beyond that, I cannot do any of it that well, or I can't do all of it completely. And
I think what I would say,
recognizing that you are a human with limitations, and recognizing that you stretching beyond your limitations is not good for you, and it is not good for the team. That is not a benefit to them.
I think what I would say is, okay, I can see how that would benefit you. I can see how that would benefit the company. I'm struggling to see how that would benefit me. Can you please explain how me taking on this work without being given any sort of extra time or time off or any benefits whatsoever would actually benefit me? Like, I'm already doing what I'm doing. Doing this is of literally no benefit to me. This is literally only a detriment to me. It's only taking away time and energy from me. So unless you're compensating me accordingly, I genuinely don't understand how that's a win-win. So like, this has to be a win-win, or else I don't think we should play.
And
now,
I have an example of almost like the opposite example. Somebody who spoke up, not in that situation, but something different. And it was exactly what we're saying. So in that, like, it was not a big deal. I have a client, I actually have multiple clients who are in consulting right now, which I have not heard of that being done in a way that treats people like humans. If you have yet
to meet someone who's like super, super happy doing that job. I mean,
and
then
not
again,
because the work's not interesting, but because the workload is insane. Just absolutely insane.
For no reason.
No.
Like for no reason that I can discern, because again, there is no such thing as a consulting emergency.
Right.
Like,
right. So I'm sure they exist, and I would actually love proof. If anybody's like, I'm doing this well, let me know, because I think I have some clients who might want to apply to your company. I'm sure there are some like reasonable employers, but anyway, I have a couple of consulting people right now, and one of them, she's just got, first of all, just is feeling the same of what we're describing. Totally underwater, totally overwhelmed, cannot fit the amount of work she needs to do in a normal day, no matter how many productivity hacks or how strategic she tries to be. I mean, there's just not enough hours. And yet keeps getting recognized and just got a promotion.
They'll reward you for how well you participated in the system.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Even if you feel like you're drowning, as long as you're like ticking the boxes. Just got promoted and was still managing the project she was on before, but now also managing this new team and a new project at the same time. So like still doing at least half of her old job and also the new job. And that was just kind of the expectation, or at least that was her interpretation of the expectation. She had a performance review come up just this past week. We talked about it ahead of time. She's like, I think I'm going to ask, can I just officially stop doing my old project? Because it's just, the new one alone is more than a job. It's already more than I can handle. Plus I'm trying to do this old thing and I just can't. And, it was uncomfortable. She's got some working on people pleasing, literally going through the course content right now with me and coaching. She's like, I'm going to practice. I'm going to speak up and say, this is a boundary. And when she does, her supervisor says, oh yeah, I knew that wasn't going to work. I was just waiting for you to come to the conclusion that you couldn't do both.
how long would she have let her suffer?
Well, that's what first I'm like, okay, well, good news is you got validation that that's way too much for one human to do. But also I'm like, what a weird management technique. I'm gonna let you see how long you can do all of this work until you come to me and say I can't.
Yeah.
Because I know it's probably too much, but if you keep doing it, I'm not gonna stop you.
You're an adult, right? You're not my child. It's not my job to advocate for your well-being. I mean, honestly, I think a manager should be consider part of their job to be advocating for their employees' well-being, but not a lot see it that way, or not a lot of systems encourage managers to see it that way. Because I think a lot of managers are very empathetic and do care, but that they feel trapped by the system too. But right.
But again, she spoke up, set a boundary, said, I can't do all of this. And the reaction was, okay, let's stop doing this one big piece. But she could have let that go on for a year, just like the client you talked about. And they probably wouldn't have said a word. Just let her do it. Yep. So if you are not advocating for your own boundaries and limitations, they will get crossed over and over and over again.
Yep. Especially when people are just draining energy and life and work out of you. Like they are not motivated to stop you. Like they might not be malignant or malicious, but they are Dementors. Okay. And they're not going to stop until your soul is sucked out of your body through your mouth.
And then they'll just go find another living human.
Right. So like you got to cast a fucking patroness up in here. Expecto motherfucking patronum. Like that's what we're here to do. I have a client right now who is struggling. Like she hasn't yet found a solution. I mean, we're working on it, but she hasn't yet found her way out through this. And I want to speak to that because some of you are in it and you can't see a way out. She's in a very rigid job that she has to go to in person every day. Like there's no remote aspect of it, which is and like the hours are very rigid. So there's, that's it. I'm glad that in some ways that is almost like a rarity now. Mm-hmm. It's almost a thing of the past. In a way, I think that the pandemic, if it did one good thing for us, it's that it kind of normalized remote and, work. And so it's actually not very normal that someone would have that kind of rigid structure anymore where they have to go to the office and they have to work these hours. But that's the career she's had and that's how it works. And so she's, she wakes up really, really early to try to like work out some days so that she can take care of, a chronic illness that she has. I'm going to come back to that later because a lot of people I coach have chronic illnesses. And I think it's directly related to how much strain and stress and lack of rest that we have.
Takes a toll on a body.
It takes a huge, huge, huge toll on a body. Like the participation in the system that's not working for you. It takes so much energy to just go against it every single day. And your body is literally absorbing the impact of that constantly. And so she's commuting and she's working. And of course, her workload is insane. It's not like she has a normal workload. She's got like a bunch of different responsibilities that she's juggling and too few resources and too much to do. And then by the time she gets home, it's like 6:30, 7 o'clock at night. And she's not getting enough sleep because she's trying to unwind and she's trying to spend that couple of hours at night doing things she enjoys, but then she ends up going to bed too late. And now she's like sleep deprived. So it's literal torture. When I hear that, I'm just like, that is every single part of that feels like torture. But what she's doing is making it even more torturous. And it's not about her because I've seen a million people do this. And I did this to myself. We've all done this to ourselves. She has started to gaslight herself. Because she's going, well, Rachel, there are people at my work who say that they get 4 hours of sleep and they seem to be fine. I don't understand. I get like 6 or 7 and I'm struggling. What's wrong with me? Or like I was on a project and this person, was saying we don't need, like I was proposing that we needed 6 different people to be on this project. And she's saying, oh, we don't need that many people. That's crazy. And she's like, the last time I tried to do a project of this scope with fewer people than that, a guy literally had a stroke. And she's like, I don't think I'm crazy for suggesting like a reasonable amount of people participate in this. But like, but it's so easy to start wondering, well, am I unreasonable? Am I crazy? So I had to obviously stop and insert myself and go, no, it's not crazy to need a normal human amount of sleep. The fact that you've literally gotten yourself into a situation where you're starting to wonder if normal things are crazy is like the height of unhealthy.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's how we know it's unhealthy. It's because in a normal world, we'd never question whether wanting 8 hours of sleep was okay. But when we're part of like this really, really toxic system, we will start to question whether having needs at all is okay.
Mm-hmm.
Needing to sleep a normal amount is okay. Needing a reasonable number of people to participate in a project so that people don't literally end up in the hospital is okay.
Like, the goal is not to figure out how to beat your humanity in the service of more productivity. That's not the goal. Trying to say, it looks like somebody else is only getting 4 hours of sleep and I'm getting 6 or 7. How do I get to that point? That's like, how do I hack humanity? How do I beat my body? And essentially, like, pretend I don't have human needs so that I can do more work and be more like a robot. When you feel like the things you're asking of yourself are trying to get you closer to being a robot, that tells me the system has gotten in your head. Because the system wants you to be a robot, because that is of benefit to anybody who is paying you. They want you to be automated and robotic and productive with no need for human breaks or needs. If you start to feel like, how do I be more like a robot? I want you to have a big giant yellow flag in your head, like, whoa, we need to hold up.
It's red.
The route.
It's red for me. It's not yellow. The flag is red.
Or like a caution flag or whatever they have in car racing. It's like the checkered flag. Like stop. That's a cue that you're not leading the train anymore. You've let the system, and that's also a sign you're enabling that system because they want that of you, and you're like, how do I do it? How do I be more like a robot so that they get what they need from me? That's where I want you to say, that is not okay. How do I rebel from that system? That is not a system I am interested in participating in.
So this is why, like, anything that's systemic is so insidious, is because it's not like there's one puppet master at the top controlling everything. It's not like most participants in the system are actively trying to manipulate you. Most of the people that you work with are not actively trying to convince you that 4 hours of sleep is better than 8 hours of sleep, or that, that you should, be less human and that would be better. But systemic thinking is groupthink. It's if we all from a place of fear and a place of just like deep conditioning, like cultural programming, buy into this thing, then we will all start to think this is how it is, and we'll start to rely on it to the point that then we, who are probably suffering at the hands of it, will start to be the ones who advocate for it and try to prop it up. Like,
perfect example of this. So the client I was just talking about, in that same conversation with her manager, it was fascinating because I could see the humanness of her manager coming out at the same time as the part of her manager who is bought into the system coming out, and they were in complete conflict. So on the one hand, in her performance review, her manager is like, I've been seeing your, I don't know, whatever, your timesheet or your log sheet or wherever you keep track of everything you're doing. And this is way too much. Like, I don't want you to get burnt out. We got to figure out a way to offload some of this because you're doing too. I understand why you're doing all of it, but like, it's too much. Not 10 minutes later, she's like, okay, and then now that you're ramping up in this new position, we want to add this on your plate, and we want to add this on your plate, and we want to get you involved in this, and we want to get you started over here.
Oh my God.
And so you can see, on one hand, there's a human inside her. It's not like an evil manager saying, like, dictating to you, be a robot, right? They want to be a human. They want to say, I see you and I don't want you to get burned out. I care about you as an actual human in this company and on this planet with me. On the same turn, I know what needs to get done, and I feel like we're all in the system. I don't know how to keep the thing churning without just doing what it requires, which means you're gonna have to do more. So that's what Rachel's saying. We don't end up wanting to become the advocates of the system when at the same time we're like, I don't like this system. This system feels terrible. But that's where it will go if you don't stand up now for what is reasonable.
So again, let's zero in on, or at least zoom in on, because I don't know that there is one reason, but let's zero in on partially why this happens. Why do people who would tell you, I don't like this system, it's not working for people, it's clearly broken, why do they then end up participating in it so deeply and end up gaslighting themselves or end up advocating for it? Like they become the manager who's advocating for the system, even though they don't like it. And it has a lot to do with the fact that if the system is the arena in which your hustle for worthiness plays out, you will continue to play the game as it is established. Because typically work and career is one of the hugest places that our desire to prove ourselves, to prove that we are enough, to prove that we are smart, to prove that we are likable, this is where it plays out. So as long as you believe that your identity and your worth is tied to what you do, then you will participate in the structure and the system as it is, regardless of how toxic it is, because it's the only place you feel like you can get your validation needs met. As soon as you break that, as soon as you divorce your need for identity and your need for worthiness to be met outside of yourself or met by your achievements or, other people's praise, other people's feedback, as soon as it's divorced from that, you're free. You don't have to participate in the system anymore. You can change it. You have agency and autonomy back as soon as you break that connection.
You have to believe whatever happens in this job, I am still worthy of all the things I want in this life. Like I am a whole human. I am a worthy human. I like who I am. Even if I never worked another day in this job, even if I never got another word of praise, I'm cool with who I am. Once that's true, it's so much easier to push back because you're not riding on that affirmation, on the validation, on the accolades, on the praise, on the promotions to make you feel good enough. You already feel good enough. Now it's like, I have self-respect. Now I'm actually more interested in you also respecting me than you validating me. So that's why this is an internal job first. It has to be an internal job before anything external will change and before people will treat you different.
Doesn't this go to show how much the need for validation and the need to prove yourself and like hustling for worthiness is an addiction? Because this is exactly what happens in an addiction. You will continue to allow yourself to be treated like crap. You will treat your body like crap. You will pump, incredibly toxic chemicals into your body and you will destroy it because there's a void that you're trying to fill, right?
And you just need more and more and more of it because it's actually
this
not
is what we're
filling the
doing.
void.
This is what we're doing. Like, as long as you are addicted to that validation and that feedback, and like this work is the place where my needs for people liking me and my needs for feeling like I'm good enough and my needs for people to think I'm smart and for my whole identity to play out, as long as it's tied to that, you're going to keep allowing the system to use and abuse you, or you're going to keep using and abusing.
And you might ask for more. How do I get more involved?
And you literally might ask for more, even though it's killing you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Like that's how we know it's an addiction and that's how we know it's not healthy.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think this episode is necessarily about like, okay, now how do we go through 5 steps to disabuse yourself of the system?
No,
but
it's
we're
not.
giving you some examples
But I
here.
do want you to start thinking about some boundaries you could set. I think that has to be the first place.
Absolutely. Like
some self-respecting boundaries to take back a little bit of this power back to yourself and start to rebel against a system that is not going to advocate for you unless you advocate for yourself.
The filter question then is that you need to walk away asking yourself today is, where am I enabling my own suffering? Where am I allowing myself to be taken advantage of? Where am I afraid to set a boundary, to say no, to just stop participating? And I probably would be fine if I just stopped doing it, but I'm afraid. I'm afraid of the short-term discomfort to the point where I will continue to allow the suffering to happen long-term. The truth is that most of you pushing back, it's not going to end in disaster. What's the worst that happens? The worst that happens is that you get fired. How many of you, honestly, listening to this, even if you got fired, would end up in like an actually terrible situation? Most people listening to this podcast, the demographics of the people listening to this podcast are generally privileged enough that someone would take them in. That, you know, like
family, you could crash on a friend's couch if you had to. You probably have a couple of months of savings, maybe to
you could go get a job at Target. Also, right? Like,
we're in a really good job market for job seekers at this moment. Like, there's way too many jobs and not enough people applying for jobs. So this is, if there was ever a time to take a risk, it might be now.
Change happens, like systemic social change happens when we reach a tipping point. And if you as an individual think that your contribution to that tipping point doesn't matter, then imagine how many times million that we're multiplying that. If everyone actually believed that their contribution to enabling the system mattered, we would reach a tipping point really quickly. A tipping point where if everyone just decided, yeah, no, like this is toxic. This isn't going to work. I'm going to set boundaries. I'm going to say no. I'm going to walk away from this job that is is abusing me and is taking deep advantage of me. And I'm going to believe and insist upon the next thing being better. Guess what's going to happen? People are going to have to change the system. The system will have to change because it will collapse.
If you want proof, look at the fact that we had a pandemic where most jobs had to go virtual.
Yep.
And they could have all gone right back exactly to where they were as life was returning to normal, but they didn't because enough people
couldn't allow
said, I'm not going back to that. This fits my life better. I want more flexibility. I want to be able to work from home sometimes. And there are jobs now that will never go back because people spoke up. They had the experience of having more flexibility and remote work, and they liked it, and they're not going back. That's why we had the Great Resignation for a level. That's one of the reasons why so many people said, nah, I'm not doing that anymore the way I was doing it before. And it has changed our workplace irrevocably. It's not going back. So I think about that when you feel like your one little contribution is not going to make a big difference. Any of you who told your employers, I want to keep some of my flexibility, you contributed to an entire culture, an entire generation of workplace change.
Yes.
That can happen again, and it will happen over and over again.
We need to keep going.
Yes.
Like we need to lean in harder, okay? Because we're tired. It's not, we can do it again. We can keep doing it. It's already started. We can just keep the momentum rolling.
The momentum has started. That's the hardest part. And so now, keep asking for more. Keep setting more boundaries. It's working.
The last thing I want to say is, because I want to call back to this because I said I would, is the whole chronic illness thing. Okay. Mm-hmm. A lot of people, especially women, because as we've mentioned before, because a lot of women, more people who identify as women, resonate more typically with feminine energy. It does have gender parallels in that way, right? Most people who would say I'm a man tend to prefer masculine energy and vice versa.
And
So
there are some
because-
very biological, like,
yeah,
changes
differences in how,
between-
right.
in how women process stress differently than how men process it,
Yes.
because we have different hormones. It's just
We have different hormones.
it's just true.
So we end up more chronically ill. We get fatigued faster because we don't have a lot of testosterone, and testosterone helps handle a lot of adrenaline and cortisol. And we don't have that ability, like literally physiologically. And so we suffer easier and we break down faster when we're under a lot of stress. And so you see that manifest in chronic illnesses in a lot of cases. I have a client who said that she had chronic pain for years and years and literally was on Vicodin, like for years. And she said, in hindsight, she's like, I was able to get off of it. I was able to find like alternative remedy, thankfully. And she's like, but in hindsight, I was in a terrible situation and my body was just internalizing all of it. She's like, I was literally just medicating how bad the situation was.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to say, like, if you have a chronic illness or you're in a lot of pain physically, or you're just like deeply, deeply tired and fatigued, it's not, please don't gaslight yourself into thinking that's not related to how awful my work situation is or how stressful my work situation is. It is completely and utterly related. Okay.
Again,
There might
from
not be a complete Venn diagram overlap. Like they might not be two concentric circles on top of each other, but there's a shit ton of overlap between those two things. And to think that there isn't is to gaslight yourself.
Again, if you think about the very biology of your humanity, stress creates hormones in your body that are destructive. They're like, the scientific term is catabolic. It destroys what it touches. So when you have stress constantly inside your body, it has to have an effect. There's no way that you're not going to physiologically feel that. So,
well, stress that's not getting used, Kristen, because ideally the point of stress is for you to run away or to fight, but we're never actually running away or fighting. So it starts to eat us alive. Basically,
right.
That's what's happening.
The point is not to have no stress. That's not that. But the point is strategically to use it and then move back to a place of homeostasis. The problem is most of us never really get to much of that homeostasis. Not for long anyway.
Because as cave people, we didn't have that many like when we had a stress, it was an acute stress. It was, oh my gosh, this rival, group of cave people is attacking us. We've got to fight or we got to run away. Like, and then we use it and then it's gone.
Yeah. Those of us who have dogs know when another dog walks in front of the yard, they get that acute stress and they got to let that dog know this is my land. And they yell and then they go right to sleep. Like that's it.
Right.
They get their backs up and then they relax. They're not stressed all day, every day.
It's chronic, right? Like our stress is chronic. And then we go, why do I have this chronic illness? Well, maybe they're related. Just saying. Okay. So to wrap this up, your body, your physical health, your mental health is not worth your participation in this system. I promise, I've seen this happen a million times. If we all insist that this isn't going to work, there will be new opportunities are being created every day. People care about this the way that we care about this. More and more and more and more companies and jobs are catching on to the fact that this system is broken and we want to offer people a different way. But it will happen faster if you stop enabling it and you stop participating in it and you insist that you deserve better, which means either insisting in your current situation, here's what needs to change, or it's you deciding this is never going to change. I can't go against this whole system. I can't change the whole, federal government or whatever, but I can decide not to work here. And I can find an employer that will treat me at least marginally better. Like that's possible. And the more we stop sacrificing our life to prop up the system, the better everyone's lives will get. And I want you to vote with your energy to make that change. Yeah. Yes, we're voting with our energy. We're voting with our time.
Yes,
we're voting with our life.
Voting for the kind of environment that you're in now and giving all of your energy and resources to that? Or are you voting for something that actually aligns with your values and cares about you as a human, because those places do
Yes.
exist.
They do. You have to be brave enough to challenge the system and set boundaries and believe that your contribution will make a difference in your life and in the lives of a lot of other people. Like I know it requires courage to like tell people no and to set boundaries and to put your foot down and to say, I think this is whack. And I'm the only person here who thinks this is whack, but let me assure you it's whack. Like,
And also,
I know it requires courage.
you're not the only one there who thinks that, but you might be the only one who's voicing it at first.
And that's okay. We need leaders. Okay. You can be a leader. And if
you need help, that's literally what we're doing next month. We are taking a group of people through 4 weeks of overcoming
getting over people pleasing,
our people pleasing tendencies, and doing exactly things like setting boundaries, saying no, speaking up, asking for what you need. These are the things these are what's causing our enabling, is our discomfort and inability to say no or to be more firm about our own capacities or to ask for help. So if you're struggling with that, which would be really understandable, that's why we want to help people with this. That's why I care so much about this, because I see the impacts that our people pleasing has on our own health and in contributing to systems that none of us actually want to be part of. And the more we can overcome that, not only the better will your life be, but the better like humanity will be. Not to be dramatic, but that's why I care so much about this. So if you want some help and you also maybe want to do it with other people who also are struggling with that, because I think that there's courage can come from community. And that's why we're also doing it cohort style. Like
live.
People can go through
week
this
by week
together and talk to each other about how it's hard and get some support and some accountability and work through it in community. I think that makes a big difference when you're first starting out.
So if that is interesting to you, we're going to be opening enrollment the first week of August. And if you want to throw your name on the VIP list is in our show notes, and we will alert you when there's, when we have more info and when we're opening it up. And I mean, whether or not you're a people pleaser, if you're not, you have even less of an excuse to walk away from this episode and not challenge yourself to stop enabling something that is directly contributing to your and other people's suffering. Okay. I don't want to hear your excuses. I want to hear what you did.
If you're a people pleaser, can you please speak up and forge a path for the people pleasers?
Yes.
Please.
Yes.
And if you are a people pleaser, let's work on that.
We're going to work on it, because I'm not giving you much leeway either.
No, you don't get an out, but you do get some support on working through that if you want to.
You feel better having gotten that off your chest?
I do.
Me too.
I feel like I've done it individually a lot lately, but it was good to do it en masse.
Yeah. Just, God, guys, we're tired of being tired. I think that's what I might call this episode. Like, what to do if you're tired of being tired, which is be a rebel and stop enabling the system.
Amen.
That's okay. Yeah. A woman. All right. Well, we will.
Well, let us know what you think.
Yeah, definitely.
Let us know how you're going to rebel.
Please.
And I'm sure we'll see some of you next month in Getting Over People Pleasing. And we will see you next week. We see you
a new expert episode. We're going to, if all goes according to plan, we should have a new expert next week to talk to us about attachment styles. Yay. I love attachment theory. Also, we're gonna nerd
out on that one.
I know. I'm intending to ask her about how attachment shows up at work. So come back, because
this could end up being a good follow through on this
I think it'll be. Yeah. So also remember, if you haven't listened to some of the episodes that I really, really, really encourage you to listen to earlier in this conversation, go to the show notes, And I will link to the few that I think are must listen after this. Okay. All right. We will see you next week.
Okay. Bye for now.
Bye.